Hey everybody, this is Rory MacDonald from MacDon and Associates coming to you with the next episode of Tuesdays with Rory. Today, I got a special guest in the studio. This is Jimmy Galat. Very pumped to have you, man. Excited to have you here in the studio, sharing about what it is that you do a little bit on the investor side with real estate. But without any further ado, Jimmy, I'm going to let you kind of give the lowdown on who you are and what you're all about, man. Let's hear it.
Yeah, my name is Jimmy. I started off going the more traditional route, went to college, got an electrical engineering degree, working a W-2 job, and started picking up rentals on the side. So started about 5 years ago, and I'm continuing to buy now.
Okay.
So,
and to give everybody just a quick lowdown too, like, oftentimes when I talk to people specifically regarding real estate investing, they look at it this like this far off. Yeah, when I'm 50, when I'm able to retire, when I'm close to, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
it's this far off thing.
Right.
And to just give people a quick, like, let me show you how attainable this actually is right now. How old are you?
I'm 29. Just turned 29.
29 years old.
Yep.
And as of right now, how many doors do you have?
I have 13.
13 doors. And
Yep.
are all those single family?
All single family.
Okay. So for people out there who are listening who don't know, single family residence is your typical home. So no apartment buildings, no duplexes or anything like that at this time. Right. Soon.
Not yet.
Right?
Yeah.
But all single family homes. So you've got houses that you own, and you're going to get into the details of kind of what you do with those, because everybody has a different idea. There's this word that floats around the United States on a consistent basis called flipping, which we'll get into it, man.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about that and kind of what it is that you're all about. But more than anything, 29 years old, you own 13 houses.
Yep.
I don't even know where to start, dude. How did you get into this and why?
Well, I always like the idea of cash flow and passive income. And for some reason, real estate just always appealed to me. Even when I was in high school, I always had this thought of, I want to build passive income, early retirement, just that whole idea. And I was always really good at saving money. So, and the first step really is to save money. You got to have money saved up. I know a lot of people talk about buying real estate with no money and a lot of that stuff, but I truly believe that you need to build up a savings before you get into this first. So I always had this idea, and I just bought one house at a time, and it's exponential growth. My first year, I bought one house. My second year, I bought another house. And then from then on, I was able to buy 2, 3, 4 a year. And it just snowballs on top of itself. As long as you continue living below your means or living the same lifestyle and you reinvest everything back in, that's kind of been my strategy. And that's how I've been able to get to 13 at my age now. But it didn't start that way. I just bought one house a year. I lived in it. I fixed it up. After the year was up, I bought another one, lived in it, fixed it up. And then from then on, it just continues to snowball. So as long as you can play the long game, it can work out for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. So just out of curiosity, your very first property that you purchased, how old were you when you purchased that property?
I was 23 or 24.
Okay. So not an incredibly abnormal number to be purchasing a home.
Right. Yeah. It was in 2018.
Okay.
So it's 2023 now. So.
All right. And in that time, you've accrued obviously up to 13 properties since then.
Yep.
The idea of passive income, explain to everybody a little bit like your thought process behind that. And like, what's the intention behind this? Because the idea, at least for me, when it comes to real estate investing and just investing in general, I'm not buying houses to own another house. It's work. People call it passive. It isn't that passive.
Right.
There's things to be done. There's work to be done. There's stuff that needs to be maintained, right? Like owning a house is work.
Absolutely.
When you say passive, help people understand like your mindset and where it is that you are trying, what it is that you're trying to achieve in owning 13 plus homes here in Metro Detroit.
Well, first of all, for me, it's more about freedom. So I'm chasing after freedom. I love money, but I'm not doing it just for the money. Like, it's about freedom. So for me, having real estate, it gives me the flexibility to be where I want, when I want. So for example, if I go on vacation, I could still manage projects going on. I can still make phone calls and I can do whatever needs to be done without being sitting in a desk all day or having to be in one location. I could be flexible with it and just have the freedom to do what I want when I want.
Yeah.
That's what I'm after.
Okay. I can understand that. Is there any intention behind this too, when it comes to like, are you looking down the road, like future projection wise, like, okay, what's retirement look like? Like, are you invested in any other ways too? Like, are you like stocks or bonds or cryptocurrency? Like, are you doing anything else besides that? Just out of sheer curiosity.
Yeah. The only other thing I have right now is my 401k with my job.
Okay.
I took out all the money in the stock market to invest it in real estate.
Yeah.
So right now I just have my 401k and then real estate.
Okay. Okay. So I don't want to say not super diversified, because I believe that in real estate, you've got 13 properties. You're pretty diversified.
Right. Right.
So, no, I just was out of curiosity. And the reason why I bring that up too, is because a lot of times this is the mindset of a lot of people out there is like, okay, well, I've got a 401k. I don't need to think anymore. I don't need to do anything anymore. Somebody's handling it for me.
Yeah.
And the reality is that you can be getting a much better return than that 4% that you're getting on your 401k.
And you got to wait till you're 65 or 67, whatever it is now. You know, I'm getting cash flow now. Now, granted, I'm reinvesting everything back into the business to buy more property.
Yep.
But, you know, maybe one day it gets to a point where I can replace my job income and just say, hey, I want to collect the cash flow and take the foot off the gas a little bit and just live off that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And when you're going into this, and we're going to get into your process a little bit, we're just kind of kicking off and getting right into it, which I love. I think it's awesome. But when it comes to purchasing, there's kind of two avenues I've noticed that majority of people look through, and that's cash flow, which I'm going to let you explain that. And there's also appreciation side of things, which I'm sure you're specifically where you're investing. I'm sure that's also something that's going through your mind. So before we jump into your process and what it is that you do, is there one of those two lenses that you're thinking through, or is it a combination of the two when you go, yep, this is a good property?
So rule number one, it has to cash flow, or else I'm not buying it.
Explain to people too, when you say cash flow, what do you mean?
Yeah. So cash flow is just basically your profit every month. So if your rent is $1,800 and your mortgage payment and everything, insurance and taxes is $1,200, your cash flow is $600 a month. So it's basically just your profit that you make every month after all expenses are paid. Now, as far as appreciation, I don't bank on it, but I buy in areas that are more likely to appreciate. So if I do get the appreciation, which knowing the market the past few years, it's been really well, I tend to buy in areas that are going to appreciate more. But it's the icing on the cake. I never buy property expecting it to appreciate or relying on it appreciating, but I just tend to buy in areas that are more likely to do so. Yeah,
that makes total sense. So, for example, I'll ask you this question first. What is your process when it comes to not just finding properties, but like, I'm a big fan of the BRRRR method, which I'm sure you've heard of, the BRRRR method. You buy a property, you renovate said property, you rent the property out, then you go ahead and you refinance it, you pull all of your cash out of it, and then immediately you take that cash and you go and you repeat this process by buying another property, so on and so forth, until you end up with 13 properties or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the method that you've taken, or is it something different?
I've done a combination of things. That is the most ideal. But when we had the low interest rates, there were some properties that I could buy and paint and carpet, maybe $5,000 worth of repairs, and they're cash flowing great. But that was when rates were around 3%. Now it's a lot harder. Like the last property I'm working on is an off-market deal. So I got it at a good price, and I'm doing the BRRRR process. So right now I'm in the process of rehabbing it, getting it all fixed up, and then it's going to appraise much higher, hopefully. Yeah. And then I'll refinance it, pull all my money out, and do it again.
Okay. Are there other processes, I'm going to call it process, because I don't even know what to call it, methods that you've gone through and you've used when it comes to, besides the BRRRR method? Yeah.
The one that is most reasonable for probably everyone is just living in the house for a little bit and then renting it out after. Because you can get the best terms, you can get the best mortgage, 3 to 5% down. You live in the house for a year, and then you rent it out, and nothing has to change.
Okay,
that's probably my favorite strategy because everybody can do it.
Yeah. And does that worry you at all when it comes to like the PMI or anything like that?
No, it's the cost of doing business.
Okay,
people are worried about $100 a month in PMI. Well, how much more money are you going to make if you buy the property? It's the cost of doing business. I don't understand that argument of, I have to pay $100 a month. Well, you're going to make how much more over all the years you own the property.
Yeah.
It's kind of short-sighted.
No, I can understand that for sure. The properties that you're purchasing, that you're buying as single family residents, to give people an idea, again, and the idea behind me asking this question really comes from the standpoint of so many people out there think of this as this like far off. I talk to people on a regular basis, Jimmy, and it's like, hey, I'd really love to buy a house, but I just don't have 20%. And they don't, maybe they're renting right now, or they're in the process of they want to sell their home and move to a better area, a better neighborhood, better school district, whatever it might be. And they're like, yeah, I just can't do it. And so there's an education piece coming from our end and from the lender side of things, with some of the lender partners that we use, of going like, hey, you actually don't need to put 20% down. Here are some other options for you. You qualify as a first-time home buyer, so you can do 5%. You qualify as an FHA purchaser. You can put 3.5% down. This isn't your first home. You don't qualify for 3% because you make over the allotted amount, whatever it might be. You can do 5% down, kind of as a minimum. What's your strategy with that when it comes to buying these initially as a single family residence, that home that you're occupying? So owner occupied properties. Are you putting 20% down on all these properties?
No, the owner occupied is 5% down.
Okay.
And another thing too is that's not for first time home buyer. You can do that over and over and over again. 5% down conventional loan, you get great terms, good rate. There is a 3% down program we kind of talked about earlier. I think there's an income cap for that one. And then FHA 3.5% down. Any of those three options are great. You know, if you're going to buy a $200,000 house in a great neighborhood, you need $10,000 down. You know, if you just work a little harder or find a way to save a little bit every month, it adds up, you know, and you can get the $10,000, and then you can get the ball rolling. And now you have a property, you have equity, you have things you can work with to continue buying more property. And it snowballs on itself. Yeah.
No, that's a good thing. What would you say to anybody out there who like, hey, what do I do? What's my first step? Obviously there's a savings aspect of this, of going like, hey, you do need to buy a house. You're not going to get it for free.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people out there?
I think you got to look long-term. I think people get too caught up in today, tomorrow, a week, months. You got to look long-term. And back in 2018, when I bought my first house, a lot of people were telling me, don't buy right now. The market's going to go down. It's at its peak. But if you play the long game, it's going to even out. You know, you got to look long-term at this. It's not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. I'm looking 10 plus years on all my investments. Mm-hmm. So try to just zoom out a little bit and see, and then it makes a lot more sense to buy.
Yeah.
And just take it one step at a time. I think people get too overwhelmed with, you know, thinking too much and trying to get too far ahead without just taking one step at a time.
Yeah. Analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Just what's your next task and focus on that.
Yep. How many people have you talked to too about this? Like, obviously there's the podcast side of things, that you jumping on podcasts with other people, which I know you've done, but when it comes to, cause this is a conversation that I have with people, like a new person once every couple weeks, of like, hey, I really want to get into real estate investing. I want to flip properties. I want to have a rental portfolio and all these things. And it's really, really, really cool. And we give a blueprint and a layout of like, hey, here's your next step. Here's what you need to do. Here's the things that need to happen. Have you experienced that too?
Yeah. Consistency will always win. You know that person that gets super into fitness and they're going to the gym every day for a month, and then it kind of just slows down and fades out, compared to the person that maybe goes a couple times a week, but they do it for 5-10 years. I really, those are two different personality types. And I think that the instant gratification and jumping from one thing to another, it's not how you find success. You got to pick one thing, and maybe it's not the right thing, but you got to just keep going with it and keep going and just don't give up.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good,
you know what I'm talking about though, right?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's funny, like the simplicity of, hey, just go do it. You know what I mean? Like reality is that's really all it is.
It is.
It's really all it is. And oftentimes we get caught up in like, I want you to expand on this, but it's like, no, you just shut up and do it.
Exactly.
And it's a real thing,
Well, the thing too is it gets boring sometimes. It's not appealing to always stick with the same thing. And it's fun and exciting in the beginning, just like anything, right? You jump into one thing, oh, it's cool, it's exciting, but then give it a few months and then maybe you're not as interested.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens. When you're looking too, what are some of the criteria when it comes to finding a property? Obviously, we talked about the cash flow aspect of it. We talked about the possibility of it appreciating and like what you're looking for as far as those things go. Are there any things that you specifically are looking for when it comes to like, yep, this is one I want to move on this. This is worth taking a look at. This is worth throwing an offer at. What is it that you look for?
Well, it's changed over time. So as the rates went up, I had to kind of loosen up a little bit to where it would still make sense. But right now I'm looking for $200 a month minimum cash flow. And I'm looking for something 75% ARV. So after repair value means what is the house going to be worth when it's all fixed up and done? And what's it going to appraise for? So those are my two main criteria right now. And the other thing too is the location. I'm strict as to what cities I invest in.
Sure. Is there a reason for that?
It brings the good quality tenants.
Yeah.
Good locations attract good people. And you might think, oh, wow, you have 13 properties, and working a full-time job, you must be going crazy. How do you manage that? My tenants are great.
Yeah.
They make more money than I do. They have great credit. I go to the house, like some of the ones that I lived in, it looks better than when I lived there. They're taking great care of it. They hardly ever bother me. If they do, it's something reasonable. And they're great people. And that's another thing too, is you got to screen them heavily up front.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very strict on who I let in the properties. I would rather let the property sit vacant than have a bad tenant in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody's going to call you every 3 days to change a light bulb or, just do silly things.
Yeah. These are good, reasonable people.
Yeah.
They respect me. I respect them. And it's a great relationship. It's worked out really well.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. So I want to come back to this really quick. When it comes to those out there who are like, because I'm telling you, Jimmy, the people that are listening to this, like they are the ones who are like, hey, I'm interested in real estate, specifically in the investment side of things. Can you walk us through a little bit like your process when it comes to like the very first one? Because this is what I've heard. I consider myself a real estate investor because I know this stuff very well.
Yep.
I haven't had an offer accepted because of the market that we're in, which we can get into that here in a minute. But I haven't had an offer accepted of going like, yep, this is it. I've got my first door. I've got my first tenant. I've got my first house that is specifically as a rental. I haven't been there yet. And that's okay. I know I'm on a path and I know I've got, I know where this is headed. It's retirement and sitting on a beach knowing that I've got 50 doors,
Right.
But I've heard that the hardest one is your first one. Did you notice that too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, not only do you not know anything and you're stepping into the unknown, you don't have any money typically when you're buying your first one, so there's a lot of challenges just getting over the hump of owning a house and better yet, an investment property. But again, just play the long game. Everything's going to work out. Just don't worry too much about the small things. And I really like the 5% down, or 3% down, whatever your situation is. But if you can just save up and do that, then make it a rental. That's the best way to go.
Yeah.
That's how I got started. I didn't come from a lot of money. I'm doing well now, but I didn't come from a lot of money. So I did everything on my own. I had to save up the money for the first down payment. I fixed the house myself and didn't hire much out, and it just builds on itself. And then continuing to invest everything back in, it's exponential growth. That's the other thing too, is for me, buying 11 to 20 is going to be way easier than buying 1 through 10.
Yeah.
Way easier. And then I know 20 through 30 is going to be a cakewalk because you have that extra money coming in.
Yeah.
And you have systems built, and it just gets easier as you go on. So if you can have that vision and remind yourself that it does get better. It's not just one property. It's going to be many, and it's exponential growth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's good for people who are thinking about this too. Well, I want to get your opinion on this. if I'm in the process of like, hey, I just haven't pulled the trigger on my first property yet, would you say to that person, hey, it's okay to, I don't want to say downgrade, but change your criteria slightly to maybe like, hey, maybe you're not going for, the really nice area. Like for just to give everybody an idea, we're in Metro Detroit. So like Rochester, Troy, even some of northern St. Clair Shores, Harrison Township, Clinton Township, parts of it, Macomb Township, Lake Orion, like areas that have a tendency to be slightly more affluent. Quite honestly, people moving to those areas want to be involved in the things that are happening around it too. Obviously you've got downtown Detroit, and that's something else too. Like that's an area to invest in. It's a good, there's areas that cash flow and that appreciate in very, very good ways. But then you also have this other portion of Metro Detroit that doesn't do that as much. One of the areas that I grew up in, one of the areas that I'm considering the idea of investing in is in Mount Clemens. And the reason for that is because I look at it and I go, hey, I know that I can go and I can purchase a property here because it fits within my budget, even though it's not even not really in the criteria wise of what I'm looking for in terms of demographic location wise.
Yeah.
So like school district is one of the things that you got to think through. I'm sure you do too. I think through it. Like Mount Clemens schools they're not terrible, but there's better schools around. It's just reality. Anybody watching this knows that, thinking through that lens, like, would you, be willing to sacrifice certain criteria knowing that you can just get your first property?
I would say for somebody starting out, yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that is your first deal is not going to be a home run. It's more important to just get your foot in the door and just get the deal. Then you got the ball rolling. Then you're like, okay, I've done this before. And then you can enhance it later on. Me now, I wouldn't sacrifice. And people might say, wow, $200 a month cash flow, like that's nothing. And that's after everything, setting money aside for reserves and such. But even so, $200 a month, it doesn't sound appealing. That's at an 8% rate.
Yeah.
And that's in a top school district in the state, very strict areas that I'm buying in. So yeah, I could go buy a cheap property that's going to cash flow $600-800 a month. But what's the area like? What's the tenant like? But anyways, just for somebody getting started, I would say just do a deal and get your foot in the door. That's the most important thing. And that's going to keep you. I've heard somebody say that they've never met somebody that's done one deal. Either they've done no deals or they've done a ton of deals.
Yeah.
And it's true because once you get your foot in the door, you're going to realize how nice it is. And it's not that bad. Like, you know how to run a business. So it's like, you always hear the horror stories of, oh, I had to go, change a toilet at 2 a.m, or I got to pump. No, you just set it up properly to where you run the business the right way and it works out.
Yeah. Yeah. And for your stuff too, what's your, in terms of getting these properties ready? Cause you're renovating them as a means of increasing the value of the property, as a means of it appraising for more so that you can pull out more of that cash when you do a cash out refi. And it also raises the value when it comes to you renting these properties out. So you might buy it. It might need a ton of work inside and it would rent, at $900 a month, you do the work to bring it up to $1,500 or whatever it might be. Right.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you look for when it comes to doing that work? And are you hiring it out? Are you doing it yourself? What's kind of what's your process as far as that goes?
Bathroom and kitchen are the main things. So those pretty much sell houses. I mean, I would say the sale and the rental are pretty similar. They both, the way you change the house increases the value in both ways. So bath and kitchen for sure, flooring, paint, those are the main things, curb appeal, anything exterior landscaping, you can make it look nice when they pull up.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the main things though. That's what I focus on. And as far as doing the work, now I'm getting to a point where I'm starting to hire out more of it, which has been nice. But in the beginning, I was doing everything myself because I didn't have any money. So I kind of had no choice. I was doing the Home Depot credit card, 2 years, no interest, fixing everything up myself and then getting the value up. And I've kind of progressed into hiring stuff out that I don't want to do. And now I'm kind of getting more towards the point of hiring everything out. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm trying to get there. to where I can hire everything out. But I don't know, a lot of people say don't do your own work, but it's been super beneficial for me. Because even now looking at properties, I know what to look for. I know what a reasonable price is to fix stuff. And I think it's been really beneficial for me.
Doing the work yourself, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, and I'm going to say this, and I want to see what your thoughts are on this, but I'm sure there's people who are listening who are going, hey, why wouldn't you just keep doing the work yourself? Save the money, right? Like, I don't want to put floors in. Yeah, it costs $2,000 more, let's say, to put floors in. But when you've got 13 properties and you've got a full-time job and you've got other things that you want to be doing and traveling and whatever else, $2,000 is worth buying your time back a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, either that or even doing more real estate stuff. What if I find an off-market deal where I saved $5,000 and it took me a few hours? What is that compared to paying somebody to install floors for $30 an hour?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm trying to move up to higher dollar per hour tasks where my time can be better spent compared to just doing the $30 an hour, $20 an hour jobs that I can hire people out for.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of what you were saying before, like it's the cost of doing business.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the cost of making it happen. So, all right, this is not just for me, but it's anybody else out there. Any words of, well, let me ask you this first before I get into like words of wisdom from a seasoned, if you will, investor here in Metro Detroit. But obviously you didn't just jump into this without any foreknowledge or people to learn from, or coaches potentially, or podcasts that you listen to. What's some of the places or locations that you got your information to go, all right, I'm connecting the dots now. A is leading to B, which is leading to C. I know where this stuff is going. Is there anybody out there or anybody who you would suggest to anyone listening, like, hey, go and listen to this podcast, go and listen to this guy, go and read this book, and it could be as simple as, Real Estate Investing for Dummies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bigger Pockets podcast for sure.
Yeah.
I've listened to every single episode on the podcast. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And there's no excuse now. You're driving, you can put something on.
Yep.
I'm working on the house. I'm always listening to stuff. I'm always keeping it fresh, because if you're not surrounded by a lot of people, and I'm not, that do what I'm doing, you can kind of get lost and forget the goal that you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And just constantly having that reoccurring in my head that, okay, going back to the long game, you got to see far out. And I keep having that message in my head, like, okay, this is going to work. It's all going to pay off. And yeah, I would recommend podcasts for sure.
Okay.
And I've read a bunch of real estate books too. I would recommend all the Bigger Pockets books. I don't read too many real estate books now. A lot of it's like self-development and stuff like that. That's all good too. But yeah, podcast is the easiest for me.
Yeah.
It just works out. You're driving or you're working on something. You can always put something on in the background to keep you going.
I've listened to the Bigger Pockets podcast a lot. There's the Bigger Pockets podcast and another, I'm not sure if you've listened to the Rich Dad podcast.
Yep.
Okay. So Robert Kiyosaki, for anybody out there, writer of the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he's got a podcast. It's called the Rich Dad Podcast, or the Rich Dad Radio Show, I believe it is. He's a really good one. And then Grant Cardone, the Cardone Zone.
Yeah.
You listen to that one too?
Yep.
Okay.
Ken McElroy too?
No, I don't.
You got to check him out.
Okay.
Because they put stuff out almost every day. So it's like kind of current to what we're dealing with in the market and stuff.
Okay.
So
yeah,
a lot of good info there.
No, that's good. Speaking of the market, I want to get into this really quick from the perspective of somebody who's not a real estate agent, but an investor. What the heck do you see happening with this market right now? Like current, what's going on? What's the reason why it's still crazy?
Yeah. So surprisingly, I thought when rates went up, so just for some perspective, rates were around 3% in early 2022. And you can correct me on this, but now they're about 7%, give or take.
Yeah, if you're not buying it on an investment.
Exactly. So I'm around 8%, maybe 7.5%.
Okay.
I thought when rates went up, and they went up so quick. I think the fastest in history that rates have ever gone up like this. I thought things were going to drop. I was ready to buy a bunch of good deals. Things were going to be easy. But I've come to realize that there's still a lot of demand for at least the houses I'm buying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'd like to separate it into, I don't want to just say the market because there's no such thing as the market, but I would like to say for the $200,000 starter home, 3-bed, 1-bath, 1,000 square feet in a great area, there's still a lot of demand for that. And there's not a lot of inventory. So it's supply and demand. Not enough supply, high demand.
Yeah.
Because now you've got investors buying these houses to rent them out. A lot of people are catching on to that it works. It's really good. You get all the tax benefits, which we could talk about too. And they're not building these homes anymore.
Yeah.
A builder is not going to take a single plot of land and build a $250,000 house when he could build a $700,000 house and make a higher profit margin.
Yep.
Why would you build a $250,000 house unless it's for yourself? But just from a builder standpoint, when you can build a $700,000 house that's going to sell and you make way more money on the same plot of land.
Yeah.
So those houses are pretty much gone forever. I mean,
as new builds, you're saying?
Yeah, that plot of land, at least, where it used to be a $250,000 house.
Yeah.
So one, the investor's buying it, like me. I'm holding it for, I don't have any plans to sell. I mean, of course, things will change in the future, I'm sure. Any house I buy, I'm not planning on selling. So you got investors buying it, and then like teardowns and new builds. Those are, you know, those take away inventory from the $200,000 house in a nice neighborhood. So it's really a supply and demand issue. That's what I've come to realize, is that there's still not enough supply to keep up with everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy, but it's just how it is right now.
Yeah.
So,
and it's causing the price of everything to go up, which I'm sure you noticed that when it came even to just the renovations of the homes.
Yeah.
That you were working on. You know,
exactly.
You got to put a wall up and you got to buy, 32 by 4s. You're like, oh my gosh, this is way more than it was the first house.
Exactly.
Because that's a real thing too.
Right.
I forgot what I was about to ask you. You talked about supply and demand aspect of it, and the tax benefits.
Yeah.
So there's a tax benefit, obviously, when it comes to owning a piece of property, just in general, because I'll let you get into it, but the depreciation aspect of it. But I think more importantly, before we get into that, is to address the word that's spoken so often or revolving around real estate, and that's the word flip. Are you flipping any of these properties?
No.
Okay. And just to give people context, when I say flip, what I mean is you're buying a piece of property, you're fixing up said property, whether you live in it or you don't, whether you homestead it or you don't, with the full and sole intention of selling that property for a profit within the next 6 to 8 months or so. That is not your intention for any of these properties.
Nope.
Have you ever sold a home?
I sold one home, but it was a different situation where I took a loss on it.
Okay.
And I had a lot of issues come up when I started tearing the walls apart. And I took a loss on it, but the intention was to appraise it and refinance it and rent it out.
Okay. So regardless.
So that doesn't really count, but I have sold one home.
Okay. But all these other 13, there's right now, at least there's not an intention behind selling these properties because you're 100% renting them out.
Correct.
Okay. What made you take this route versus, and you can get into the tax aspect of it. You can get into the long-term aspect of it, however you want to do it, but why not flip?
Well, right now I have a good job, so I'm making pretty good money at my job, and flipping is just another job. For me, when I'm rehabbing these properties, it's quite a lot of work, and I'm putting everything new furnaces, new appliances, stuff like that. So right now, I don't see the point of doing all this work up front and not getting the long-term benefit of it. Yeah, I get a stack of cash now, again, going back to instant versus delayed gratification, but I don't get to ride it out and not have any repairs for 10 years. That's what I like. I like not having to deal with anything for 10 years and everything's brand new and the tenant loves it and it's a great property compared to you just make the money now, you get taxed heavily on it, and then you got to go do it all again. The property's not yours anymore. I want to keep those properties that I put all the work into.
Yeah. So you're looking at this over the long term of going, because when you sell a property, the tax piece that Jimmy's talking about here is revolving around capital gains.
Yep.
When you sell a property that you've owned less than 2 years, if it's a primary residence, and if it's not a primary residence, it's 7 years. If you own it less than those numbers, you are taxed heavily on that through capital gains tax. And I've seen capital gains tax as high as 42%. 43%
Yeah.
on the profit of what it is that home is sold for. So now you walk away and you've made, let's say, I mean, hypothetically, you get a really good one. You walk away with 100 grand, 40 grand is now gone.
Yep.
You got
to pay your agent.
And you got to pay your real estate agent. Yeah. Like let's say that you're profiting 100 grand. Let's just pretend for a minute. Like agents are paid. Let's say there's a mortgage that's paid off. You've paid all the contractors. Everything's done.
Yep.
You walk away with 100, immediately slash $40,000 off of it.
Right.
Which is insane to think about.
Right.
It's crazy to think about. So when it comes to your side of things, are you doing anything like talk about the tax aspect from your perspective as a landlord and as an owner that is keeping these properties and renting them out? What are you doing that's a tax benefit to you?
Well, there are two main things that you get tax benefits for when you own rental property. The first one, as you hit on earlier, is depreciation, which basically the government gives you a tax break for owning property for wear and tear. So it's over 27 and a half years. Don't ask me why, but you take the value of what you purchased the property for minus the land and you divide it by 27 and a half. That amount is tax deductible every year you own the property. On top of that, you get mortgage interest. So your mortgage interest is tax deductible as well. If you take out a HELOC on the property, that interest is tax deductible. Any repairs are tax deductible. And the list goes on. I don't want to get into it too much. I'm not a CPA. Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, okay. I understand it at a high level. But basically, I haven't paid any tax on my rental income 100% legally.
Yeah.
You know, I'm playing by the tax code. Everything is legit. I report all my rental income, everything. And in fact, I have so many tax benefits from my properties that I pay less taxes in my job, my W-2 income every year, because the tax benefits pour over from the rentals and slash off from my W-2 income.
Gotcha.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't even know that was the case. I didn't know it bled over.
Yeah. There's some exclusions, but for the most part, it's up to 25K.
Okay.
So for example, if you make 100,000 and you have 25,000 extra tax benefits from the rentals, you get taxed as if you made 75 grand.
Okay.
Which is a big refund. If your tax rate's 30, 35%, you're getting like $7 grand extra.
Yeah.
Just at the end of the year.
I love it. Wow. So last thing, Jimmy, we're going to wrap this up. We've been on for 38 minutes. I could talk about this for 2.5 more hours.
Same.
Only Jesus and real estate are the two things I can talk about forever, dude. I just can't help it. But when it comes to anybody out there, if there's any words of wisdom, any like, hey, like, let me encourage you, let me light a fire under you, whatever it might be, I'm going to turn the camera on you and I'm going to let you just talk for a second to anybody out there who's considering this, who hasn't yet pulled the trigger. What do you say to them?
Just remember that it's exponential growth. So you're not going to get rich off your first property, second, third, fourth. It gets easier with time. Play the long game, and it's going to snowball on itself. But really, just stick with it. Be consistent. Don't jump from one thing to another. Be consistent, and it'll pay off for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up, brother. I appreciate you being on the podcast, having time to come in here and share some of your wisdom as somebody who is not just calling themselves an investor in the market, because there's a lot of those out there, but somebody out there who is actually doing it, owning properties under the age of 30, has 13 properties here in Metro Detroit. For those of you who are out there who are thinking about this and going, hey, I don't know if it's possible for me, here is living proof right here in front of you. Jimmy's going to have a much different life when he's 50, 60, 70 years old, 80, 90, whatever it might be, because of the work and the time and energy that he's putting into now when it comes to real estate investing. So it is worth it. Pull the trigger, go and do it. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us over here at MacDonald Associates. And if you want to touch base with Jimmy, are you okay with this? If I am like, hey, I can put people in contact with you if they have questions?
Sure. Yeah. Cool. If you want to give my Instagram, that'd be
that's good. Actually, I'll let you do that. What's your Instagram handle?
It's Jimmy_Galat, Galat.
Okay. Jimmy_Galat, Galat. Go check him out on Instagram. Give him a follow as well. But yeah, man, I just wrap this up, dude. Super thankful for you. Super thankful that you had the time to come in and be a part of the podcast. Hopefully we have you on again.
Absolutely.
When you get to number 20 and we can celebrate a little bit too. That'll be cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, thankful for you. And yeah, thankful for you guys all tuning in today's episode of Tuesdays with Rory. Super thankful for you guys. We will catch you next time. Besides that, you guys have a blessed